so let it be written, so let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors, and today we're going to do an informal round table, so to speak, with only just a handful of the designers that worked on A Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin. It's a book that we released through Absolute Tabletop. All three of us wrote and designed portions of the book, and now that it has shipped to many, still shipping to others, we have it in our hands, the actual copies. And so just talking about it and doing a little bit of a retrospective now that it's been a little while, I thought would be a really good time. So the thing I wanted to start with, and James or Jeff, either of you can just jump in. It's a big book. It clocks in at almost 500 pages, and we didn't work on it chronologically. So there was a lot of jumping around and helping each other out, rewrites. Hey, can you read this? Edit this. What was something that caught your eye as kind of a surprise, like as you were flipping through? Whether it was, oh, I didn't even know that existed, or, oh, that's different than the last time I saw it. What was there anything like that for you?
I think the part that hit me the most, flipping through that was like that, was just the whole like wonders section, like the bleak and the wailing gray, and like that whole sort of section. Some of those wonders I worked a fair bit on, like I did a lot with the Arkans and the Valens and like all that sort of thing. But some of them I touched very little or very early on in the process, like the bleak storm generator and the wailing gray resurrection stuff and like all that stuff. I was involved with early on, and then it kind of just advanced past, and I had other stuff to work on in the book. So I like going back and like seeing through like just like how much there was to each of those things was like these wonders are bigger than I remember them being, like in a good way, where it's like in my mind it was like, a page and then like the roll tables and maybe a couple extra little boxes. But like some of those things have some real heft to them and like the descriptions and the tables and the generators and all the stuff. So it was just like I forgot how much there were to some of those little side things. And it was really cool to like flip through some of them and be like, wow, like especially I think the Wailing Grey one was the one that like really did that for me, was like there is so much more to this idea than I remember brainstorming, and that was really cool.
That's actually a really good example. The Wailing Gray was probably one of the wonders, especially that I feel like we let other things dictate. We had the idea, like you said, okay, it was brainstormed, and I remember Tim telling me, about it. The Wailing Gray is like this place people go when they die instead of dying, in a sense. It's obviously more complicated than that, right? But that idea, there's just so many more cool things, and then we were able to tie parts of that to the world and stuff, and it was like that was a really cool one. For me, probably my favorite section that I knew existed, but got so much better with the rest of the book, right? Very thick book, as Tim said. At the very beginning is this section we call the Life in Dragongrin section. And the things we decided to focus on, a lot of them are like, if we give you a little bit of a nugget there in this first, 10, 15 pages, it will show up somewhere else in the rest of the book too. So it's almost like a very high level view of many of the little things you'll find, nowhere near covering all of them. But for example, like one of my favorite things is we have like coins, like Coinage. Now, I've never really used Coinage in games, but here it's not like, here's how much everything costs. It is, for example, we talk about something called a bent coin, which is not an official coin, but still taken as tender, but you'll kind of be given a hard time for it. Immediately, you have a scene in your world. You're there, somebody next to you tries to pay with a bent coin. Well, what is that? Well, we're about to find out together. Instead of like lists of all the equipment you could buy in Dragongrin and then you're just some other person wearing a +2 armor class thing, you have a bent coin, or bartering is called like gleam, and you have phrases that you say like, oh, I bought it with gleam. I traded something for it. These little things give you such great impressions of the things that can happen in the world. And in my opinion are the nuggets I want in the game to make it go, oh, we're in Dragongrin. These things are happening. There's a bent coin. There's an Arcseer. There's, a bleak storm, all of these things. And the book does such a great job of like just listing a lot of them, like just giving you a ton of tone up front in that first section. So I kind of forgot like how much fun that was, that part.
Yeah, and I have a unique perspective in that as the project manager, I had to give the final green light to everything. So I know a lot of like behind the scenes. So it is going to be challenging for me not to tell you like a little factoid about everything. So I might just do that because that's really fun for me. And it's the kind of stuff I like when I hear another creator. I'm like, oh, I love that little thing. So the bent coin generator is because in the beginning, when we were first writing it, there were going to be a bunch of different coins for all the regions. And then, as you start world building, you realize, well, no, that's not how it would be. If there was truly a sovereign, one sort of main bad person, they would also control the economy. But you can't just make a bunch of coins disappear. So there would still be all these, basically like if you have that coin in that region, people that live there will say, okay, look, it's still backed by our economy. So we had all those, and we were like, let's just put them in the generator and then make it so that we take the actual reader on that same journey. Hey, these are coins that still exist in the world. We wrote this cool thing that was going to be like a coin generator for each region, and then we just overlaid it with, but the evil that has won is actually in control of the economy, but you might find these coins in some of the regions still in circulation. And then I have to tell you about the Wailing Gray.
And I wanted to throw something in about the bent coin.
Please.
The book, in my opinion, does this thing where it gives you what you need when you need it, rather than saying, here are all the different coins for every region, right? Like, a player just has to memorize that, or a GM just has to memorize that type of information. But instead, you can do it more like a movie, where that's the way I'm looking at it, where it's like when you find out about something in a movie, they don't then explain to you everything. They just go, well, you found one. That's cool. Maybe there are others, right? So you roll that bent coin when you need it, and you have the generator there to have a cool one unique to your world, instead of what we often get, which is, well, it's Electrum in this world, and we all have to say that because that's what the book says, So I like that concept, that we separate ourselves from that.
And I tried to lean into that because I'm the kind of GM that doesn't want to have to in my own world that I help to write, I don't want to memorize what coin is for every region. So I was like, No, I'm going to, exactly what you said, I'm going to hand wave it, and it's a generator. Nowhere in this book will you find, in this region is this coin at all. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, that's not important to me as a storyteller.
And it clears up room for us to do other cool stuff.
And make your own.
It's such a great, blend of, you get the cool lore and world building aspect of having a bunch of different coins for a bunch of different regions, without having then the bookkeeping of all right, on the character sheet section, I have to have 8 different parts of currency I have to track them all for who's going to take what from where. And it's just you lose all the bookkeeping and tedium of hyper varied currency while still getting the cool aspect of this guy pays you with a coin you've never seen before.
I love that.
It's not going to be a thing. Yeah.
I love it. And that's and James, as you kind of mentioned, we went for that throughout the whole book of how do I GM, what's cool at the table, and then reverse engineered it. So a little super behind the scenes about the Wailing Gray, and this is not a pedantic correction. If you notice, it's actually not in the Wonders section technically. It's in the combat section. And the reason why it's in the combat section was a little shell game that I played. We really had to pick and choose what was in this book. And we were having to cut things and edit or truncate. And, I didn't want to lose the Wailing Gray. But technically, on paper and on the schedule, I didn't have time to write a whole other wonder in what we all agreed on. So I thought, I'm going to tack it on to the end of the Brutal Champions combat section and see if I can fit it into the book.
Yeah, so you still get something.
So you still get the Wailing Gray and the Resurrection stuff, but snuck into a different section. And that's just sometimes the production side of things.
Yeah, Trojan horsed it right in there.
I did, and it slipped. No one said anything. They were like, okay.
That's just part of that.
But that the truth was though is that it there wasn't enough room for a full wonder because that was a templated thing, like you said, Jeff, with a bunch of lore, and there were specific bullets, so it was easier actually to slide it in on this. So, So, for me, the thing that I was kind of surprised about when I was flipping through and was like, is I went to the Dismembered Lord section, and even though that was one of the last things we wrote when we were finalizing everything, it was a blur because we were getting down to where, we had a bunch of stuff that needed to then be cobbled together into, okay, this is the final version. So you have like years worth of notes and lore and ideas, and we have to decide, okay, what is the Dismembered Lord? And I just remember not really remembering the whirlwind of writing there's like a story of how he came to be. And I reread it, and I just thought, wow, that's better than I remember it. I just didn't remember a lot of the details.
Yeah.
And so, and I, I don't say that to pat myself on the back. There were a lot of people involved in helping to edit it and tweak it, and, Barker and Matt and Jeff and James. But like, when we were coming up with Dragongrin, the thing that was the biggest and scariest to have to figure out, quantify, and actually like codify on the page was the Dismembered Lord. This huge idea. And how do you make it so that like he exists and the world is the way that it is, and make it make sense without too much big like meta hand waving? And when I'm reading back through this story that all of us concocted about the Dismembered Lord, I start thinking, that's believable to me. And I think that's the part that was not like, oh, this is good, but more I'm reading it and I'm like, I could see how this could happen. I could see this person making these choices, and I can see this chain of events leading to what it leads to. And that surprised me because I didn't remember it holding that much water.
I remember that was something that we did a lot of. Like, that was a whole like couple days of a lot of voice messages between just you and me, and I'm sure you did it plenty with a bunch of other people too, of just like going over the transcribed version of like your voice message of the story and like tweaking it and finding ways to tie things in together and to like build a motivation out of it. Like we spent a lot of effort like storyboarding that story,
Yeah.
and trying to like beat it out and find all the things that would make it tick. And just the whole Dismembered Lord section, I think, was where the most care had to be taken to like merge the lore and the rules. Because like when you get to somebody that powerful, like you don't just want to be like, here's just a god being who can do whatever he wants, and you can never do anything to him because he's so cool and so awesome. But you also don't want to be like the Dismembered Lord, the ruler of all the realms, master of time, and he's like got like 400 health, and you could kill him in 2 rounds of combat. And it's just like it took a lot to try to like justify the lore to the mechanics and the mechanics to the lore, and trying to like make sense of all that thing. It was probably one of the more difficult parts of the design.
Yeah, because you're trying so hard to balance. A lot of what we talked about was expectations, where, like you said, people want it to be, people want the Dismembered Lord to be very strong, but to be fightable potentially, something that they can interact with. Another really cool part about that is we found ways, and not directly, like this happened in a different way, but now looking back, we found ways to give the Dismembered Lord people above him on the food chain. I say people, but like creatures and things, like he is also not where the buck stops on the world. Like other stuff is going on. And I thought that was cool because we equally have this very big, powerful being that can do all of these things and accomplished all of this. And like you said, this whole, section really solidifying that, because we know that payoff is important to people. But still, like, hey, there's still bigger stuff out there, and not that, yeah. You should get the book, to find out more about that, I guess, if you're interested. But I love that idea I feel like we handled the sense of scale very well for such a large book and such a large place in Dragongrin.
Yeah, I mean, we had to. Like, the Dismembered Lord is the pin that holds the whole world together. Like, honestly, he is. It's the Dismembered Lord is like the beating heart of Dragongrin that fuels the rest of the concept, So I remember many painstaking conversations between me and Tim of like, we have to make this guy worth it. Like the book, in a sense, has to culminate to here, and we really need to make sure it manages to succeed in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
I think we got there, in the end, but it was a lot.
I think so too.
To figure out.
Like, I feel really proud of what everyone contributed. Like, there are definitely, flipping through the book, one of the things that I was like reminded of in the best way was, I was like, wow, there were a lot of really talented people who, for their part, did this thing that only they could do. So, you know, we had tons of really good designers, tons of freelance. I say tons. It was actually a really small team, but it was a concentrated, dedicated team. And everyone had their way of going through a section and finding what they were great at. And it was almost like contracted work, like building a home. Like, the electrician specializes in electricity and wiring it that way. And so we had certain people where I was like, I would consider them to be the, you know, this is your job. Yeah, I know you're very good at this. Can you read this section? And they would make me notes, and then we'd make revisions. And everyone kind of had that thing they did where they would come in and check it from every angle so that it was just a little bit deeper and a little bit like, it's easy when you're writing lore to make mistakes in logic because it sounds cool to write it in one place. And then when you go back, it's like, well, wait, if they're X, Y, and Z is a culture, why would they ever do this? Well, because when we wrote it in the first draft, it just sounded really neat to fill in that blank. But then having somebody come in and make it feel like a real culture is just fun. It's fun to work on a team like that. So,
yeah, and even just some part of that is literally the iteration of, hey, I think this is cool. And somebody else goes, well, wouldn't this be cooler? And with more people, we were able to do that more times. And like you said, things came out so refined because everybody has that specific perspective in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and when you have like people who can see from different angles from you when it comes to that sort of stuff, that can make such a huge difference. Because like, I can be very confident in writing something like very cool in like my way, but like I'm gonna leave some gaps in perspective that just I don't have. So when someone else can say like, this part is really cool, this part seems a little underdeveloped, how about we size that up to this? And then when you can basically have somebody for every part of the paragraph who can look at that, like it makes it so much better in the end to have all of those different ideas in there.
Well, I was just going to say, I'll raise the hand, the old edit hand, which is like, I know we're very close to time. So is there something like any kind of final words we wanted to say, or anything else, or a question that you'd want me to kind of pose of like, what are you most proud of? Or
that was actually one of the things that I was just going to say, like, it'd be cool to like, you know, if we can do a bit of backslappery, like, did you see anything in there and be like, I did it good on that. That was like,
yeah,
I liked what I did there.
I think
yeah.
I think that's
be
important.
A fun little roundtable, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's very important. So, all right. I don't even know if this helps you anymore, but so one final thing, you know, I think, you know, when you have a book that's this big and it was this challenging to make with such a small team, I think like reflecting on some work that you're proud of is okay. And knowing that we worked as a team, sometimes you can look at something that has your fingerprints on it and say, I'm really proud of how that turned out. And I think that that's healthy. So what about you guys? Is there something in this book when you're flipping through it and you go, you know, I remember having my hands in that and I'm really proud of how it turned out as a result?
So there are definitely a lot of things I could go through here, but I'll just sort of follow my gut of like when I was flipping through the book the other day, I was showing my girlfriend, you know, the book because it was her first time seeing it, and I was happy to have it in my hands for the first time. Just kind of gauging how I felt about each section sort of going through. And what definitely stuck out to me of being like, man, I remember doing this and like it turned out so well. Just broadly, just I'm really happy with the heritages and the cultures, but specifically like going through those cultural focuses, those like special abilities you get to pick as part of the culture. Just like, man, that's fun. That's cool. Those abilities are cool, and I like the way that they turned out. So yeah, just getting to go through and like reread some of those for the first time in like a while now. I mean, like it made me want to play play the game. Like I want to make a character. I want to make a character so I can pick one of these culture abilities because they're really cool and they're really fun. So that was the part that I think I was the most proud of, or at least that resonated with me. Reading through it again very recently was, yeah, I think we really did some cool stuff with the heritages and the cultures. The way that we balanced it all out, the way that we applied it philosophically. Making sure that people had a lot of variety they could pick from, and they could make the character they wanted to make without being bound by like, well, if I'm going to play a ranger, then I can't really play a halfling because they don't get the +2 to the dex all that stuff, like that stuff. And then just that extra little spice, the heritage focus abilities, the cultural focus abilities that you could say like, I can play, a Talisar fighter and you can play a Talisar fighter. And they're going to be so different still because I'm going to have the heritage blade or the fairy wings or whatever it is, and you're going to have the flying mount. And it's just, yeah, I was really happy with the way that that turned out. And I'm still, yeah, very proud of most of those abilities and kind of what we were able to do with them.
And I'll just say one thing to that very quickly. The contest that we had internally was always make sure none of these is markedly better than the rest. Because if you're going to make one that's the coolest, you're essentially just wasting page space on the other three that no one will ever pick. So it was always this like, okay, but is this as cool as the other one? Because we wanted to make it hard to choose. We wanted it in the best way. And that was always the goal in the design was, are both of these making it difficult to choose? Are these three like, gosh, I want to make two characters? And if so, we win. And that was like, I think we pushed that envelope pretty hard with all of them. And I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of a lot of the character options for that very reason, because it took what could have been sort of rehashes of a lot of things we know and made it more interesting and makes it feel so much more like you're playing in the world. For me, that's my big thing, is really having the tools to give the impression that you're playing in the world, and I feel like the book does that really well. And part of that, one of the things that is sort of the thing that I feel I excel at a lot, is making sure that those things make sense. I don't think that it was exactly me that talked about that, Tim, but a good example is the coinage, or like how the red sale market works, right? They have to collect all of this money, every, I think it's month or, every season. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but the idea is like the logistics of that. And okay, well, how does that work? Oh, well, maybe they collect some of it and sell it, like we really thought a little bit ahead, and it makes the world not have any sort of big holes in it, or at least, if you find one, of course. I'm sorry, right? Like, I can't say it's perfect, but like even a lot of, there are so many motives there in all the regions. You have the Lords of Ash, and then other people that are against them. Like there's conflict in every region of multiple different factions, and so much of that required from everybody a lot of refinement of like, hey, well, they say their philosophy is this, why would they do this? Exactly what you were saying, Tim. And I feel really happy with how many tones we struck, how many different feelings there are in the book between the regions and the cruxes, especially, of like, no, you can play in Dragongrin and it be this, or you can play in Dragongrin and it be this, and you're still playing in Dragongrin. And that's probably the thing I'm proudest of, is a book this big still feeling cohesive.
Oh, that's really good.
I remember we did a lot of work, especially with like the regions, like you say, of like, these all need to simultaneously feel like part of the same place, and like the entire own universes. So like trying to find a way to make that work is tough. But yeah, I agree with you. I think we did a really good job finding a way to make all the regions feel part of Dragongrin, while also sort of having their entire own story and feeling and experience to kind of go along with them. So yeah. many conversations about how to do that that happened, but I think we got there in the end.
I was just telling James yesterday, we were actually talking, and I was like, I have backups of all of the voice messages that you and I sent each other, Jeff, and it was like, it was work for hire, like, hey, we need help, I need help, I know I need this help. And one of these days, I was telling James I would love to start. I went back and I found, it took me some time, but I found the first voice message we ever sent, and it was about Zaman.
Oh, yep.
I don't know if you remember that. It was, we were both going to AtCon, I think, within a month or whatever, and hey, I'll see you there. But we started brainstorming, and I remember it was just this relationship of like, hey, I remember almost all the messages tended to start with, "This is going to be really out there." And we'd say that to each other because
Yeah.
like we were just learning each other. And so it's that balance of like, hey, I really have this cool idea that's kind of crazy, but you don't know me yet creatively, so you might think that this is off the rails.
Yeah. I remember some of those, like, specifically, it's just like when I posed the idea that, like, because you sort of already had the baseline of, like, it's a jungle that's alive. Like, it's got sort of like a hive mind jungle thing. And I remember, like, having the idea of, like, what if the jungle is, like it's conscious because of, like, these ancient people that did this ritual and they, like, fused their consciousness with the primordial who died here. It's just, like, so, like, wild. I remember, like, having the idea and then going, like, how do I pitch this to somebody else as anything other than insane? Like,
Yeah.
And I have that voice message. Now, technically, I think maybe that might be a spoiler for the region. So it's up to you if you keep it in the video. I think that it's fine. But but I remember then having, like, what had to have been 30 minutes to an hour worth of conversation back and forth about, okay, how would that work? And making sure it made sense in the world. And like you said, James, the cohesion is only because all of us were, like, tone liches and we're like, no, that doesn't make sense. That wouldn't make sense because these people we've established as having this idealistic view of X. So why can't happen? I know it's convenient narratively for this part of the book, but you can't do it. Find a more creative way. And we would always do it.
Yeah, exactly. That births probably so many cool ideas, you know.
Right. And so what I was getting to was, at some point I would love to pour through those and like release them. You know what I mean? Like re-listen to them and just kind of be like, oh man, this is crazy. Like, remember? You know,
I was joking with my girlfriend the other day because I was telling her about the voice messages, especially, like, the ones that we would send and, like, how crazy some of them would get. She's like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to, like, hear some of them. It's like, do you have time for, like, 2 Game of Thrones worth of audiobooks? Because that's how long you would need to listen to, like, hear them all. Like, it's saying 30 minutes to an hour to talk about some things. We had some voice messages individually that were that long.
Which is insane, but...
Oh, it's wild. Yeah.
It was so necessary at the time to just talk through and, like... But... if you had to guess real quick, how many hours of voice messages would you say? I guessed, well, no, I don't want to tell you. If you had to guess, if you took from the minute we started until the project was over, in terms of, like, it being about writing and the creation of the book, how many hours of voice message do you think it would be?
My gut check would be like 60 to 80. Like, I'm not even kidding.
Well, because it was over. Let's talk about time scale. How long was this over, right? You're talking over at least a year.
Oh my gosh,
because you're talking about AtCon, and I'm like, so if you think about that amount of time, that's so.
Oh my gosh.
Low.
we had a brief period of time where we were doing, like, 2 to 3 hours per day for, like, a week.
Yeah, like, even stuff like that is like,
and that's
10 hours right there. Like,
you're right. I said to James, I was like, oh, it's at least 6 to 8 hours.
No, it's way more than that.
Yeah. Dude, and it's
order of magnitude.
Well, so and we'll wrap it up, and I'll say what I'm most proud of. But it was I had an hour commute to work and from work, and Jeff is in a different time zone, so I would take the full hour usually and just brainstorm what we needed to brainstorm, and then he would do that when he had time, and then if I was able to, I would listen to all of them on the way home and reply. So, yeah. The thing I am proudest of when I kind of looked back through it, and it's the art direction. Really, really, and we had an amazing team of artists. So this is only, I can't take the full credit for this, but I can say that, and thankfully, you know, these artists have said verbally to me, like, hey, thank you for this art direction. It was very good art direction to get us here. But looking through the book and the page elements and the regions and the maps and the monsters, just how there's so many different regions, but in the same way that tonally it doesn't feel like it's a different world. When I flipped through the book, I never was pulled out of it like, whoa, what is this? And I'm really happy with the way that it looks and how we presented, and the marrow design that I worked with David Keg on, and like the Dismembered Lord, and like those are huge ideas in my head, and I wanted them to be iconic. And so thank the Lord I had these artists who were okay with me giving them like 50 revisions and down to the line of like this and that. But I'm really happy with how the creatures looked and how distinct, in my opinion, the world looks like an intellectual property. It looks like a standalone thing, and I'm really happy about that when I flip through. Yeah, and I think every once in a while it's okay to have a sore back from slapping each other's and slapping yourselves, and I think, at least in my opinion, we've earned it after the amount of pure tonnage of hours we put in to get it finished. So, any final thoughts? Anything else you want to say as we wrap up? Well, thank you both for all that you did on this book. I could not have even come close to doing a fraction of it by myself. Thank you to everyone who did work on it, if you're watching this. And we're Tabletop Terrors. We're all about fun, creativity, and creating tabletop RPGs. And if you are interested in A Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin, you can go to absolutetabletop.com. Consider subscribing for more content like this, and for probably a lot more Dead Man's Guide stuff as we have the time. And I guess we'll wrap up with the Tabtarian toast.
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Sláinte. Anyone have an end card real quick?
I have something.
Go for it.
What's really cool about this book is it took so much work from so many people, and we were able to kickstart it, and you know, the Kickstarter did well enough that we were able to create what we did. We overshot a lot of our, what we expected for the page count, for example, right? We created a lot more content. What's crazy, and something we say to each other a lot, is this book could have never existed otherwise. Like, you couldn't pay a team of writers to write this book from the beginning because it would have cost $1 million. Like, so many people worked on this book from a place of passion. And that's what's really cool, is in the time that we live, basically, we have the tools to be able to collaborate freely and to work on these things easily and to be connected over such great distances that a long time ago, painters would, all have one part of a painting they'd work on, and it would create a work that could never be created by just one of them. Da Vinci has parts of paintings that are famous because he did just that part, and you can see how it differs. This is like if Da Vinci did the whole painting, in my opinion. The people that we were able to collect, and like I said, the luxuries we're afforded to be able to make something like this. It's ridiculous to consider that we got this thing created. Not even because it's so good, but as a way to say that I love it so much, but in a sense that it was finished and it wasn't a flop. Whatever you think of it, we did it. And if I really begin to ponder the scale on that, it blows my mind every day. So very excited to be holding this book in my hands.